Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're doing, another deep exploration, this time into a source stack that honestly, it might just bend your understanding of reality a bit. And decision making, even how your own body works. We're going to try and unpack some pretty big cosmic ideas.
Yeah, it's going to be hopefully a relaxed look, maybe a little chilling in places, but definitely with a sense of humor. Because some of this stuff, well, you need it.
You really do. It's a session that kind of starts very personally, almost like in a hospital room setting, and then just spirals out.
All the way to the edge of infinity, pretty much.
Yeah.
We're looking at some really foundational material here, how personal psychic stuff connects to these huge metaphysical systems.
Okay, so let's get specific. We are diving deep into session 29 of the early sessions, book 1 of the Seth material. And this one was recorded way back on Wednesday, February 26, 1964 at 9 p.m.
Right. And, of course, we have to give credit where it's due to the Seth material itself, which is just incredible work, and also to the publisher, New Awareness Network, for keeping this all available.
Absolutely. And just to be clear up front, this deep dive, like all of ours, is being distributed totally free of charge on all the major platforms. We're doing this purely for educational purposes, digging into these ideas, pulling out the bits that make you go, and sharing them with you.
So session 29, like you said, starts very close to home. It's about a dream and this sort of telepathic flash that Jane Roberts had about her friend, Miss Callahan, who was quite ill at the time. But that personal insight, it just blows up into these massive themes. We're talking parallel planes, consciousness right down in your cells, how we choose our reality. And then, just to keep us grounded, Seth wraps it all up by basically giving Jane and Joseph homework, domestic chores.
Yeah, that structural whiplash, that's kind of what we love about this material, isn't it? So yeah, we're going to try and connect that very personal feeling Ruburt had about Miss Callahan maybe, leaving, all the way out to the complexity of, what did he call them? Numberless existence quadrants. Okay, let's start with that first bit then, the premonition. Ruburt, sensing her friend, was deciding to leave this plane.
Okay, so Seth jumps right in and confirms, yes, the core communication, that was legit. Ruburt really did experience a true telepathic flash.
Yeah.
So the source of the info was good. But then comes the tricky part. What happens after the flash?
Right, this is where our human minds kind of mess things up, isn't it? Seth says the moment that, pure telepathic insight hits the conscious mind, it gets, and this is his phrasing, colored by the other elements that made up the dream, and this was subconscious fantasy.
Exactly. The raw data gets through, but then we immediately start dressing it up with our own stuff. Seth says intercommunication is rarely, almost never, received by the conscious mind in its pure condition. It's like he calls what we get a hasty twisting of channel, or even a rather inept and usually somewhat disastrous attempt to pick up this material with the outer senses.
Inept and usually somewhat disastrous. Wow, that's quite a review of our reality processing skills. So we take this pure, maybe multi-dimensional truth and we force it through this tiny little funnel of our ego and our 5 senses, and what comes out is symbolic mush.
Pretty much. It's a filtering problem. Your subconscious gets the core message like, Callahan is deciding to depart, but then it uses whatever symbols and emotions are currently floating around in the dreamer's mind to build a story around it. And that story, that subconscious fantasy, can end up hiding the original simple truth.
But the core message in this case was still accurate. Miss Callahan was, at some deeper level, deciding to leave this plane. And this decision was happening even if her conscious self, her personality, might have been totally against the idea, protesting it.
Yeah, the essential data got through. And Seth even pinpoints the trigger for this big inner shift. It was her finding out she needed operations on both eyes. That specific physical issue prompted what Seth calls a deeper part of herself, to look at the whole situation and decide, okay, departure is now necessary. It's the right path.
So wait, the operation itself wasn't the cause of death in the usual sense. It was more like the catalyst, the thing that made the subconscious go, you know what? This body isn't really fit for purpose anymore. Time to transition.
That's exactly how Seth frames it.
Oh.
And once that inner decision was made, the preparation started immediately, subconsciously. Remember the dream detail? Miss Callahan wearing black clothes. Seth explains that it wasn't just like random dream symbolism for mourning. It represented her subconscious actively getting ready for her departure, right from the moment she learned about needing the operations.
Okay, but why keep the conscious personality out of the loop? Why does the part of her that thinks of herself as Miss Callahan have to be totally ignorant of this huge decision being made?
Seth is really clear on this. He says that ignorance is absolutely necessary. If the conscious mind knew, okay, I've decided to check out on this date, The fear and panic would likely cause it to break apart in most unpleasant circumstances.
Oh.
It might even disintegrate before the whole self could manage the withdrawal process properly.
Ah, so it's like a psychic safety fuse. The ego's job is survival here on this plane. Telling it the game's ending prematurely would just cause chaos and potentially disrupt the complex energy shifts needed for a smooth exit.
Precisely. And you could see the early signs of this preparation phase in her behavior. Like, there's this bit about her not remembering Frank Watts, who was a friend of Joseph's.
Yeah.
Seth says her personality was already gently disentangling itself from this plane. She was focusing less and less on this reality stream, kind of mentally checking out already.
That gentle disentanglement, Seth describes it as an easier way out compared to a sudden, so-called quick death, because it avoids that intense shock. But then he drops this concept that is, well, it's properly chilling, the idea of dual materialization.
Yeah, this is one of the bits that really sticks with you from this session. He explains that in this kind of gradual withdrawal, Miss Callahan will actually be almost fully materialized on the other plane before she technically dies here.
Wait, hang on. How does that work? How can the entity, like, power two realities at once? Isn't there a massive energy drain? Or does the energy just sort of reroute slowly?
It seems to be a slow rerouting. And the materialization on the other side isn't necessarily a solid physical body like we think of it here. It's more of an energetic form, appropriate for whatever plane she's transitioning to. Her vital core of awareness, Seth says, is appearing on another plane. And crucially, on that other plane, she appears as a wondering but not frightened young girl.
Okay, not frightened. That's huge. It means the part of her arriving on the new plane is already kind of rebooted, free from the fear and the physical limitations of the old body, already adjusting. It really implies the larger self knows exactly what it's doing, where it's going, and why.
Yeah, the old body here becomes almost like a charging station that's slowly being unplugged,
Yeah.
The conscious self left here starts experiencing the side effects, memory loss, maybe disorientation, while the core awareness is already setting up shop in the new neighborhood.
This whole transition process brings us right to that paradox Seth mentioned earlier. I think it was in the 7th session, where he claimed the shock of birth was actually worse than the shock of death.
It feels wrong, doesn't it? We're culturally programmed to fear death, see it as the ultimate trauma. But if you look at Seth's analysis of the process, birth involves these immediate and critical adjustments of the strongest nature.
Immediate and critical. Yeah,
Ooh.
think about it. You go from this perfect, supported, watery environment straight into a world where you suddenly have to breathe on your own, regulate your temperature, fight gravity, find food. It's an instant, high-stakes struggle for basic survival.
Right, you're thrown into a strange environment with, as Seth puts it, no time in your sense really to make any mistakes at all. The pressure is immense. That's the shock.
But death, in this gradual model at least, does not involve a new immediately critical adjustment. There's a time for rest and a time to catch up, so to speak. There isn't that instant fight for survival. It's designed to be an easier transition, termination being less demanding than that kind of radical beginning.
And interestingly, Seth suggests that the main reason we need that rest period after death is because of the specific nature of our reality. He calls our physical plane a place where the camouflage pattern is unusually rigid.
Okay, let's pause there. Camouflage pattern. We should probably unpack that bit of Seth jargon for anyone listening. What makes our plane's camouflage so rigid?
Rigidity, in this context, seems to mean the extreme consistency and the universal buy-in to the rules of the game here. Time, space, physical laws, they seem incredibly stable and non-negotiable. Our senses are basically built to perceive only this consistent pattern. Solid things stay solid, gravity always works, time marches forward. Maintaining that illusion requires a huge coordinated focus of energy from everyone participating. It's that shared, unwavering commitment to these specific rules that makes our reality rigid.
Gotcha. So when someone transitions out, they're moving from this environment of maximum enforced stability into potentially a reality where thoughts and beliefs might manifest much more directly, more fluidly. And that shift in the operating rules is the adjustment that requires a rest period to kind of deprogram from our rigid expectations.
Exactly. The newly departed personality needs time to recalibrate, to get used to a reality that isn't so fixed. one that responds more immediately to consciousness itself.
Okay, so before we get totally lost in the multiverse, Seth brings it back again to personal energy and awareness, connecting to those inner senses.
Right, he touches on emotions, calling them the tail end of the inner senses, like the final, maybe most distorted signal we get from deeper psychic input. And he uses the example of Frank Watts again, who wasn't consciously picking up on Miss Callahan's impending departure.
Yeah, Seth says Watts would have known, say, if a child he was deeply connected to and caring for was approaching death, especially if that happened during a time when Watts' own energy was really intensely focused on this earthly plane. Like, in an almost compulsive personal manner, I think was the phrase.
Yeah. So Watt's current state, being maybe more relaxed or less intensely invested right now, means he wasn't putting out the psychic energy needed to receive or, importantly, translate those subtle signals about Miss Callahan. It shows that awareness isn't just on or off. It depends heavily on where your focus is, how much energy you're investing in this particular reality stream at any given moment.
And then, just briefly, he connects us back to the bigger picture, the entity concept.
Mhm. He mentions that the whole self, over many experiences, gradually remembers its past lives, its reincarnations, and figures out its relationship to its own larger entity or oversoul. And here's a key point about potential evolution. A personality isn't just stuck being a personality forever. It could eventually become a whole new entity itself, but it's based on inherent strength and ability, and also of desire. And, crucially, no coercion involved here.
Always back to choice, isn't it? Choice, ability, self-direction, even at these massive cosmic scales. Which kind of brings us perfectly to maybe the most radical idea in this whole session, that this independence, this choice goes all the way down, right down to the tiny components of our physical bodies.
Yeah, let's zoom right in now, microscopically, because this is where things get really wild. Cellular consciousness. Seth states pretty clearly that the cells in our physical body also have their awareness. They make their own independent decisions, and they have individuality and even self-consciousness, at least to some degree.
Wow. Okay, because we're taught, biology 101, cells are just little machines following chemical orders. But Seth is saying, no, they're more like tiny individual consciousnesses working together in this massive cooperative that is us.
That's the picture he paints. Think of them like, I don't know, billions of conscious citizens living in the city that is your body. And our overall health, our functioning as a whole organism, depends on the degree to which all those tiny cellular individuals make the right decisions for the collective.
Which immediately brings up the big question, the cancer paradox. If cells are conscious and independent, and presumably the overall goal of the whole self is health and survival, why would they start acting in a way that destroys the whole system?
Right. The key, Seth says, is that while they're independent in their immediate actions, they're also utterly dependent on the driving organization of your subconscious. The subconscious is like the main communication network, the command center, sending out directives non-verbally to the entire organism.
So how does the subconscious send those signals? Is it chemical? Is it purely energetic, like a frequency?
Seth implies it's more like an energetic blueprint or broadcast. When something like cancer gets going, the subconscious might be sending out signals reflecting deep inner conflict, maybe unresolved trauma, or even just a chaotic desire for radical change, any kind of change. The cells, with their limited perspective, pick up this strong signal, and they interpret it simply as an instruction for growth.
Ah, because growth is what cells do, right? That's their primary function, their basic drive. So the cancer cell isn't being malicious. It's just diligently following the strongest signal it's receiving from headquarters. Grow. Grow fast. Without realizing that this particular growth pattern is actually fatal to the larger system that supports it. It's following a corrupted order.
Exactly. It's a really sobering look at how powerful our own subconscious patterns and unresolved issues can be. They literally shape our physical reality down to the cellular level. It shows the subconscious is the ultimate director, and its instructions, whether they lead to health or chaos, will be followed.
And Seth uses this whole discussion to take a swipe at our use of the word instinct. He calls it unfortunate.
Yeah, because it basically comes from our human-centric view that only humans possess real consciousness.
Right. We see ants or bees doing complex things, and we dismiss it as instinct because we can't imagine they have any internal choice or awareness.
But Seth insists these actions aren't just pre-programmed reflexes.
Right.
Organisms like bees and ants do possess a degree of consciousness, self-consciousness even. They make choices.
Their choices might be very different from ours, operating on maybe a more collective level, but choice is not impossible, he says. They're just manipulating their camouflage, their reality along different lines, maybe using a less rigid, less individualized framework than we do.
Which is the perfect segue, really. If consciousness and choice exist right down at the cellular level, shaping our internal camouflage, then think about the implications for the macro world, for the sheer scale and nature of reality itself.
Right. From the tiny cell to the vastness of simultaneous planes, this is where the deep dive really hunts its name. Seth just lays it out there. There are endless planes occurring simultaneously with your Earth.
And the immediate hurdle for us, stuck here in our rigid time-space framework, is trying to grasp that our solid Earth. It isn't solid at all to beings on other planes that seem to take up the same space. Although Seth quickly adds that even thinking about it as taking up the same space is based on our limited perspective and is probably wrong from a higher view.
Because our outer senses are part of the camouflage too, right? They're specifically designed only to perceive our particular pattern, solid objects, fixed locations, linear time. Other planes have camouflage patterns that are just beyond your present comprehension, as he puts it.
Yeah, these aren't just like parallel universes in the sci-fi sense. They're entirely separate realities, operating under different rules, completely unperceived by us. Seth is emphatic. Parallel existences occur constantly. And they're not empty dimensions. They have their own cultures, their own histories, their own scientific series, their own complex camouflage code system.
Okay, endless planes, parallel cultures. It's a lot. To help us get a handle on it, Seth offers two broad categories for these other realities.
Right. First, there are the culture establishment existences.
Yeah.
These sound somewhat similar to ours in their basic organization. They have historical continuity, like a past, present, future structure.
Right.
And they rely on a strong ego mechanism, like our sense of self, to maintain that structure and navigate their reality.
But there's a crucial difference, he mentions, something that really highlights a core issue with our human experience on this plane. He says these other culture establishment planes don't have our dual inner and outer sense of alienation.
That's huge. That feeling of alienation. It's that split we constantly feel between our inner world thoughts, feelings, intuition, and the outer physical world. We often feel separate from our environment, even separate from our deeper selves. These other cultures apparently have a similar organizational structure, but without that fundamental internal conflict. Their experience of reality must be much more integrated, less filled with that angst of separation.
That makes a kind of intuitive sense. They get the structure, the history, the ego focus, but maybe without the constant internal battle between what their senses tell them and what they feel or know on a deeper level. And interestingly, Seth says none of these particular parallel cultures are aware of our plane. We're mutually invisible in that setup.
Okay, the second category is quite different. The minimum camouflage planes. These sound much more fluid, less committed to maintaining a constant, solid-seeming reality all the time. Seth says they only materialize camouflage patterns at certain times, specifically to express and deal with inner conflicts not yet worked out.
Whoa. So they're like reality on demand. They don't bother sustaining a whole complex world unless there's a specific psychological or spiritual reason, like they need a temporary stage to act out and resolve some internal drama.
That seems to be the idea. It really throws our own plane into perspective, doesn't it? Our reality, with its incredible rigidity, its nonstop 2047 materialization maintained by billions of minds. Maybe we're the unusual ones in our dedication to this particular complex, ego-driven show.
The sheer scale of all this entire hidden civilizations, reality itself being conditional, it's mind-boggling. You can almost feel the mental gears grinding trying to process it, which Seth himself seems to pick up on in the session.
Yeah, there's that great little moment of human grounding. Seth had been talking about these plane groupings leading up to the idea that beyond even the personality entity structures we vaguely grasp, there are these numberless existence quadrants. And Joseph, who's taking all this down, apparently stops him to check the spelling of quadrants. And Seth patiently spells it out. Quandra-S.
Huh. I love that. The cosmic entity delivering revelations about the structure of all existence has to pause for a spelling check. It's just the perfect touch, reminds you that this profound information is still coming through human filters, using human language, requiring human effort to even write down.
And these quadrants, they're described as having astounding complexities, leading up to these gestalt building blocks of massive intelligence. It's easy to feel completely insignificant contemplating that kind of scale, right?
Yeah.
Just a tiny speck. But then, immediately, Seth pulls it right back. right back to the individual, the particle.
Yeah, this is where it all comes together. The universe is infinitely complex, but the power lies in the smallest part. This brings us to what Seth calls the keystone sentence. We should definitely quote this one directly.
Okay, here it is. Seth offers this summary of how existence works. The framework is so woven that each particle is dependent upon every other. The strength of one adds strength to all. The weakness of one weakens the whole.
That's not just like a nice philosophical thought. He's presenting it as a fundamental law of energetic reality. Every single choice, every action from a cell deciding to divide all the way up, literally impacts the strength and potential of the entire cosmic framework.
And he continues. The striving of one increases the potentiality of everything that is, and this places great responsibility upon every consciousness.
And then he specifically advises a double reading of the above sentence for it is a keystone and a vital one. This reframes responsibility entirely. It's not just about being good or bad, it's about actively using your abilities. He says it's the responsibility of even the most minute particle of consciousness to use its own abilities and all of its abilities to the utmost. The whole foundation of existence rests upon the degree to which this is done.
So the ultimate takeaway from exploring all these mind-bending alternate realities isn't to escape this one. It's the opposite. It's about radical, focused, self-actualized responsibility right here, right now, within this supposedly rigid camouflage plane we inhabit. Our personal effort, our striving, literally strengthens the fabric of all that is.
Exactly. And just as we're absorbing the weight of that profound, cosmically motivating insight about universal interconnectedness and responsibility, Seth completely pivots and gives Joseph and Ruburt the most down-to-earth, practical, and frankly hilarious piece of advice you could imagine.
It's classic Seth, isn't it? That sudden zoom from the infinite to the immediate. After describing numberless existence quadrants and gestalt intelligences, he says, basically, Joseph, you need to get Ruburt his dowels this weekend.
Dowels. For building shows. Why? Because, Seth explains, improving their immediate physical surroundings, fixing things that annoy them daily, will actually prevent them from dwelling on more sphere changes that might be convenient sometime, but would only be disruptive now.
It's cosmic psychology applied to home improvement. He's saying that the low-level constant irritation from, say, a messy entryway or not having enough storage space builds up a kind of psychic pressure. And if you don't deal with those small, manageable frustrations, that pent-up energy might push you towards making bigger, potentially destabilizing life changes like suddenly wanting to move house, or maybe it manifests as inner conflict.
So fixing the entryway isn't just about having a tidier house. The feeling of order and control that the new setup provides acts as a sort of psychic container. It grounds their energy. If you're feeling overwhelmed by the infinite, maybe the best first step is literally to, buy some wood and build something tangible in your immediate world. Create some structure.
It's a perfect illustration of how that principle of responsibility works across scales. If you can't manage the small stuff, the physical details of your life in this camouflage, how can you expect to handle the bigger psychic energies you're dealing with?
He also gives them a quick final to-do list. Seems aimed at keeping their energy focused and balanced. Resume writing down dreams, that's key for accessing that inner channel data we talked about earlier. Start using the ESP cards they'd received from Duke University, practical psychic development work. And then, maybe the best advice of all, maintain a balanced social life.
Yeah, with a suggestion they should laugh about it, implying maybe they hadn't been prioritizing it. But a balanced social life.
Yeah.
Honestly, that might be the ultimate grounding technique. It keeps you connected to this plane, stops you from getting lost entirely in the intense inner explorations.
Okay, so let's try and wrap up this absolutely packed deep dive. We've journeyed from Miss Callahan's gentle departure and dual materialization to why being born is apparently tougher than dying. We've discovered our own selves are conscious decision makers, and we've gazed into the staggering complexity of endless, simultaneous reality planes hidden beyond our rigid camouflage.
Okay, let's unpack this. So what does this all mean, really? I think the core message cutting through all of it is that reality at every level is fundamentally shaped by inner decisions and focused energy. Our physical world, this rigid plane, is a result of incredibly strong shared beliefs of chosen camouflage. And within that framework, every single particle of consciousness, from your smallest cell right up to the biggest gestalt entity imaginable, has this profound responsibility. A responsibility to strive, to use its abilities fully, because doing so literally strengthens the entire universal structure.
Beautifully put. It really brings it all back home. Which leads us to our final provocative thought for you to ponder, pulling directly from Seth's ideas about cellular consciousness and that keystone of responsibility. If our individual cells, these minute particles of consciousness within us, influence our health, our reality, our ability to manage this camouflage, what unacknowledged collective decisions might the cells of the entire human species be making right now about the future of our shared plane? Are our collective subconscious drives mirrored in our cells, pushing us towards, fixing the entryway on a global scale? Or are they perhaps steering us towards one of those more severe disruptive changes Seth warned about?
That's definitely something to chew on as you look at the world around you. And if this has sparked your interest, we really do encourage you to delve into the Seth material books yourself, especially the early sessions, book one, where this session comes from. It's incredibly rich stuff.
Absolutely. You can find these books and learn more by visiting the New Awareness Network website and their bookstore. The specific link is sethcenter.com/the early sessions.
Well, thank you for joining us on this rather mind-expanding deep dive into session 29.
Yeah, thanks for sticking with us. We look forward to exploring more corners of reality with you again soon.